episode of Relaxed and Fast. It's just me and Coach Evie here today. We're gonna jump into long runs, why long runs, how long runs, what it looks like. I take it back, but it's a bunch of stuff. So we got the dogs here today. Goose is up, and Coach is up right now. Got Kettle being here too. Just your call right on the recording. Perfect. Making the presence known. Not Goose. Yeah. Okay. So something kind of unique. We all do a long run, no distance all the way through 10K. Something kind of unique about our program. Do you want to start with like what a long run is by definition for us?
Yeah, so long runs are 20 to 25% of weekly mileage. It's supposed to be all continuous. The goal is just to really just build strength and build the cardiovascular system, build capillaries, spend a lot of time on our feet and going. This could be very interesting recording this. The dogs are very active right now. Want to be very involved. I did long runs when I was in high school. I tried to build up to, 11, 12, 13. I think I got up to 14 once or twice. That was a pretty big amount of percentage of my weekly mileage in high school because I was pretty low mileage. But as I got into college and started doing them more consistently and got up to the point where I was doing 16, 17, 18 mile long runs on a pretty consistent basis, is when I really started to see the most improvement. And so it's something that I just, over the years of coaching, I think the kids that consistently do and build their long runs are the ones that see the biggest improvement across all the distance events. And I think it kind of comes back to the general philosophy of trying to just become the most well-rounded runners that we can. I think a lot of the mid-distance runners, yourself included, don't like long runs when they first get here and can kind of struggle with them. And we do try to baby you guys through a little bit. But at some point in time, you do have to rip the Band-Aid off and start going a little bit longer. And so part of the way that we can do that is have you run your longest run and then come back and add on the bike or the elliptical or the boost or whatever it happens to be. So
This is like minute-wise, mileage-wise, what does that look like typically range?
For the women, want to try to get 80 plus minutes. On the guy side, 90 plus minutes usually. That kind of seems to be the sweet spot. I run all the long runs with the women, so I can usually manipulate the effort a little bit more than I can with the guys. And so I know for the most part with you all that we'll get rolling pretty good on a good majority of the long runs and cut down, and the last 2, 3, 4 miles can end up being pretty quick. And so I'll use that a little bit to judge on how far we should go depending on how fast we're cutting down and some of that kind of stuff. And typically cross-country camp is where we introduce a lot of this and try to get after it a little bit more. It's one of the first times everybody's back together, and usually everybody's pretty fit from being over the summer, and they kind of want to show that fitness off. And then I'm usually not as fit, so the girls are trying to drop me. So that's always fun too.
I think that was the first time I really did drop in the long run was camp senior year.
Yep.
I was at 13 and I completely dropped you. Poor Goose. I had to leave Goose behind.
Yeah.
Goose was, I think, ready to go, but
Yeah, he was not happy with me.
I had to run away the last 2 miles. But yeah, it is a big deal to kind of like build towards that one. Like we run this summer with the idea that that's like a big long run when we come back. It's always tough because like after we get into camp and hills and whatnot, but it is an exciting one. with the like, so with 80 minutes, is that 80 minutes counting what you add on the bike? Is it they're running on the ground for 80 minutes and come back and add more?
Yeah, the goal would be once again, it kind of depends. So Alyssa would run 60 to 70 minutes and then add up to 2 hours on the bike. There are times where you'll run 80 minutes and then add up to, an hour 40, hour 45 on the bike. Somebody like Hastings or Maddie Kyle would just run the whole hour 40, hour 45. So once again, it does depend a little bit. If you can get up to 80 minutes of continuous running, I always feel like that's a pretty good place to be, at least, for the first couple of weeks. And then we can kind of see how you're adapting to being on your feet for that long, or 90 minutes for that matter, and then start to add a little bit more on top of that, with the goal being that eventually you can continue to run more of the long runs.
Last year I did a lot of, we'd run hour 35, sometimes push that hour 40, but then the goal was an hour 50, 2 hours total with bike time afterwards. So sometimes it only be 20 more minutes on the bike, but just getting right on to build that. This year we used the anti-gravity treadmill for me building back. But that was nice that I would run with 7 miles with you guys and then go and hop on for 5 more miles in the anti-gravity to kind of slowly build that back up with my injury, which is a really cool tool we have. And I think we're starting to utilize that more on long run days. We're seeing people cycle through, getting on there. It's tough because only one can go at a time. We're all going at the same time. But I think we've done a better job of incorporating that into our Sundays as a way to get people more minutes on their feet that day.
With some of the people, especially the people coming back, we'll try to start them on the anti-gravity. So you'll have a group that will spend 10 to 15 minutes on that to start, and then you'll have a different group that's out running for 15 to 20 minutes. Then they'll come in and they'll get on it, and then you have the people like yourself that might be adding on at the end. So I feel like we've done a decent job of at least spreading it out so that more people can be on it for longer periods of time.
It helps having like an elliptical up there now too. That helps get minutes in. One more question, I guess, about like the starting ranges and stuff. If you're a high schooler that hasn't done long runs before, like where do you throw that in the mix to start?
I usually just ask them, like, what is your longest run that you've ever done? And we just kind of start with that and make sure that it wasn't like a one-off, like, I ran a half marathon with my friend, and so, that's 13. Well, they did that once, and most of their other runs are 8 or 9 miles. And so if most of their runs are 8 or 9 miles, then we'll start with 8 or 9 miles. And once again, camp week is usually, the 2 weekends of camp, we'll usually say, let's try to run your longest run you've ever run. And then the next week, let's add a half mile or a mile onto that and just kind of see how they're doing. And then we just try to progress from there. The more distance-oriented people that have run some more mileage, we'll kind of bump them up a little bit quicker. But some of the 400, 800 kids, we'll just keep them around there and slowly maybe add 5 minutes every couple of weeks type of thing, with the goal of, once again, trying to hit that 80 or 90.
I think, like, on average, I'd say we kind of have the goal of, like, our women who ran the whole time are, like, that between, like, 10 and 12 miles. And we have that group of injured that, like, or not even injured, that, like, more fragile group that get that, like, 7 or 8 consistently and then just hammer for almost 2 more hours sometimes on the bike after. But, yeah. It's, like, kind of go to the men's. I don't know what the men are doing. And then the top half. Goose runs the whole thing. He's letting us know right now. He's getting in the mic.
Yeah, Goose runs the whole thing and wants to run more.
Yeah. There's been very few times I feel like I've actually wore Goose out. It's usually he's a pace pusher.
It's usually the first long run back when I haven't been taking him on as long of runs over the summer. So, and the heat gets to him a little bit.
The best part of long runs is, and Coach, I don't think I told you this, I told somebody else this. Towards this part of the season, we start getting into some of like the on your own long run, so we're not meeting as a whole team every morning. And when we have them on our own, Coach and I usually still end up finding a time that we like run together. And I think it was the morning after conference or the Sunday after conference. I was so tired. I was getting out of bed that morning and I was like, Goose better be so happy to see me. I'm only going for Goose. Like, forget Coach, I am only going for Goose. And he better be so happy to see me this morning. He did not disappoint. He was very excited to see me.
Yeah. He loves his running buddies.
It's gotten better about pace pushing. He usually gets a little excited, especially if the boys are out in front of us. He's determined that we like have to go with the boys until I can't see them anymore.
Yeah.
So he usually gets us ripping pretty quick. But that's all right. Coach said he gets to control the pace. It's Goose. Goose is controlling the pace.
That is a true statement.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about like what that long run looks like. How do we fit people into it? Where does that fit into our training?
Yeah, the long run is just such an important part of what we do. It really does lay the foundation, and it's something that we keep in throughout the whole year. It's one of the few things that we consistently, like, we do it every week. We'll have our Schmedium long run the week of conference or regionals or, nationals type thing. But the rest of the year we're keeping that in there. Even on our down weeks, I always want to keep the long run long, just to maintain, kind of keep air in those tires and kind of keep pushing that energy system, because I just think it's so vitally important. And so we do them on Sundays. We do them at 7:30 a.m. It gives people a chance to go to church and have the rest of their Sunday afternoons to take some naps and do some schoolwork and all that kind of stuff. But I just feel like it's so important. We get better efforts in, I think, when we run them as a group than when people head off on their own. I think the other piece is that we have speed development the next day, and a lot of times, present company included, will do their long runs really late in the evening, which
That's long runs have been at like at 8 o'clock at night.
yeah, but which also means you're finishing at like 10 o'clock at night. And so for somebody that struggles with sleep to begin with, doing something like that right before you're supposed to be getting ready for bed is not always the greatest.
Yeah.
And so just having that group mentality, getting up, getting it over with type of thing, I think it is really beneficial. And so because of that, we end up taking Wednesdays or on your own. We don't even practice on Wednesdays. So that's something that's a little unique too. But yeah, I just Sunday morning long runs. Yeah, very important. Very, very important.
So why is it so important? Why do we do it? What are some of those things that you can benefit from?
Yeah, just building the aerobic system, building capillaries, spending time on your feet, having your cardiovascular system stressed for a really long period of time. It just starts to create all sorts of adaptations. Most of it is just the cardiovascular benefits that you get from it. There are pieces to learning to be more efficient with your fuel and, all of those types of things. I don't know that being an 800 runner or 1500 meter runner that you need to get into, like, you're learning to burn fat more efficiently. Like that's more for the marathon type stuff, but having more capillaries and blood vessels going into your muscles is really beneficial, and being able to clear and make your heart stronger and your legs or your lungs more powerful and all of those things that's really what we're trying to get after, is just building that cardiovascular system. And you can see it in the freshmen that come in and haven't done them before. It takes them a while to adapt to it, and they really struggle to be out there for that long a period of time. And then, by this time of year, they're able to handle it. And then all of a sudden their racing is going better, and they're a lot stronger at the end of their races, and all of those pieces too. And so, I think you could speak to that. Like, could you have run a school record 10K as a freshman, compared to, or 17:14 or whatever the heck you ran in the 5K? And I think a lot of that does come from just the long run and just being out there and time on your feet and stressing the cardiovascular system.
Yeah. I think some of the non-physiological advantages too is for the middle perspective. There's just the confidence piece of it, or we always talk about kind of tempos, a little bit of character building for the middle distance kids being out there for that long. It's tough. Getting through those miles 5, 6, and 7 suck sometimes. But I think you do build some confidence from that, knowing that some programs don't do that sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, I ran 13 miles this morning. It's always fun going to church and being have 13 miles under my belt. But I think then there's also the confidence piece to it, and then as you start to hang on a little bit longer, and I know I'm with the women's team, there's always, they get really excited when they stick with us through the end. In cross country, that's a big deal, that we usually start as a group, and then you and I will slowly pull away and drop, but then we slowly pull a couple more in and a couple more in. Or Gianna's a freshman, hops in with us right now full time pretty much this year. Katie pretty much from the start was able to hang, but it's always those last couple miles when we really start working it down that it builds, I think, a ton of confidence for them to how long they can hang with us, and that gets closer. How fast we get going at the end, that there's those benefits of it too, that it just makes you feel strong. And then when you're doing that, cutting down further than a 10K for some of those 10K people, that always helps get a little boost of confidence there too. And I know, go ahead.
No.
I was gonna tell my Hastings story. It's my favorite Hastings story. I didn't really get weaned into it freshman year. I feel like I kind of got thrown into the long run, but it was partially COVID-wise, as we were on our own for that for a while. So all of the fall, we were running our long runs without coach. Just women's team were just meeting and going. And I got thrown in with the big girls, the seniors. Kelly Brennan came back and ran with us, and Alyssa. And I think there was I'm gonna say there's 8 of us, and we met at the towpath. We started going, and I remember looking down at my watch. We were running 7 flat. A little freshman Hope, I think, had maybe run 10 miles once in my life. And we were just moving. I just remember watching it go from 7:15, 7:10, 7 flat. And Hastings eventually was quit looking at your watch and just go. I was okay. So I was hung in this pack. I ended up going 10 miles because we did 5 out. So I knew it was going to be one of my longest runs. And they just started rolling on the way back and just started dropping. And we kind of split up into twos and started spreading out. And I looked down at my watch at 6:50. Mile 8.5 at this point. To get to mile 9, it's 6:45, and I remember just hanging on for dear life. And Hastings turned around and looked back, and she had maybe 2 steps at me at that point. And pardon Hastings French, but I just remember her turning and looking and going, "You're a fucking badass. You're gonna stay right fucking here on my hip, and you're not gonna fall off." I remember being a little freshman and being okay, yeah, sure, absolutely. The Hastings just ripped it nationals and cross country the year before and was a complete badass. And I thought she was so cool and so fast. And when Hastings tells you you're not allowed to fall off, you're not allowed to fall off. So I just hung on for dear life the last mile. And she dropped me off at 10. I think she went and probably ran 3 more. But
yep.
I will always remember that long run of just the confidence of actually oh my gosh, I did stay with Hastings at the end of it. That was a huge deal. But also the intimidation factor oh my gosh, I have to stay with Hastings. I can't let her down. But that stuff builds community, it builds the relationships with the team. It's a huge bonding piece to the long run, the suffering together.
Yep.
But
yeah, and that you bring up a really good point. I think that's why we meet on Sundays is I think the community piece of it is really, really big. I used to do long runs on Saturdays with a group down at the towpath, and there were a lot of older gentlemen that were probably my age now that were down there that were getting ready for marathons and stuff like that. And then Fred Kieser would be there, and so he was, the Olympic trials marathon guy, and then there'd be a bunch of college kids and then a bunch of high school kids, and so that was kind of just where I cut my teeth and kind of really started to figure some of that stuff out. And I remember, in high school, I'd get my butt kicked every single week. And then once I got into college, I was starting to be able to run up with the top guys. And then post-collegiately, I could go out and do it, and just run with those guys. And I do agree that being a middle distance runner and having to focus and having to hang on for an hour and a half or an hour and 40 minutes or an hour and 50 minutes or whatever you're heading out to do builds so much character. And having that ability to focus is such a key part of it. And the confidence that you can get from those things is just so huge. It makes 2 minutes feel like it's nothing. It makes 4 minutes feel like it's nothing. But you have to continue to build that week after week after week.
We talked a little bit about cutting down there. What are some of the different types of long runs? We don't always cut down, so I guess breaking down, like when we use the cut down, when we go different distances, long run.
Yeah, some of it's just kind of by feel, and that's another reason why I like to meet as a group, because I can kind of read the room a little bit and see energy levels, although energy levels at 7:30 a.m. for a bunch of college kids on a Sunday morning usually isn't great. But you can definitely tell a little bit different from week to week on how everybody's feeling, and so based on that, I'll say, hey, we need to cut down the last part, or if you're feeling good, cut down, or just spend time on your feet today. And so I try to judge some of that stuff. In the past at some of the other schools we've done, we've gotten a little fancier at certain times a year where we'll give, if we know we have a group of 5 or 6, we'll give everybody a different number, and they can break away and do a surge at some point in time within the last 2 miles, but you have to go in your sequence of order. So that's been kind of a fun thing to do at certain points in time. We've also done stuff where we've done specific cut downs, or we'll do marathon paced miles. When I was at McPherson, we had a mile loop, and we would do a very structured progression, 2 mile at a time, cut down and cutting down to to tempo pace. Gooser, off. Goose.
Is there something you'd like to say? Okay.
Goose down. Goose down. Down.
It's like you guys are talking about long runs. You guys keep saying my favorite word.
Down.
It's like the
There you
Instagram thing
go.
where you say all your dog's favorite words. We're just teasing poor dudes.
But yeah, I've found that the cut downs is in letting some of that happen organically a little bit is kind of the best way, at least for our group, to go about doing it. We did a lot of that when I was at Sac State too. Those women would get hammering on the end of their long runs. They were very uncomfortable at certain points in time, because I would run with them as well. But yeah, with some of the marathoners and adult runners that I coach, I've gotten a little bit more into doing marathon specific paces during some of their long runs to get them ready to go do their races. But with our crew, I think, as I said, just starting basic and just spending time on your feet is the first and foremost. And then, obviously the two of us and Kelly and Hastings and so on and so forth, we've done some, Bella and Maddie and whatever, have done some pretty nasty cut downs at the end of some of our long runs.
I got pretty good at dropping you last year. There's a couple. It gets dirty.
Yeah.
I think the fastest you and I have cut down together was 6:15. And then I think I went one more without you at 6:10.
Yeah.
I remember you over being like, please tell me we're running fast. And then it was like, we're going 6:15. You were like, okay, that makes me feel better. Goose was loving it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just think they remember some, like watching some of Alyssa's cut down. We talked about the one the other day.
Yeah.
Her cutting down.
Yeah, her bad 5K into her very impressive long run.
Her and the Maddie Kyle was notorious for that too, right?
Yeah.
She'd come back and rip.
Bella was too. Bella had, I think Bella and I closed in sub 6 a couple of times on some of those like camp long runs. Yeah. And then Bella and Kelly got down really rolling one time.
I've heard some of the stories of like somebody going out to try to chase like it's probably Maddie. The stories I heard were probably Maddie Kyle. That Hastings would be like someone had to take the bullet and go.
Yeah.
So we kind of touched on a lot of things. Why do we do it? How do you do it? Different kinds of long runs. Why it's so important. Is there any other little tidbits?
I think the other piece to it is like not only do we cut down, but then we always do strides afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another big piece to our long run day is just teaching the body to run fast while you're tired and focusing on your form and being relaxed and fast and quick hands, quick feet, all that kind of stuff. And so I think that is a really important piece to it. We do a full dynamic warm-up prior to, and then doing all of our correctives and rolling and all that stuff afterwards. So when it's fall time, we'll meet in the park and we'll rotate between different spots in the park and hit up the trails and try to stay on some softer surfaces. When we get into the winter time and it gets really cold, we'll meet at the indoor track. And so that way we can do our warm up and we can do our cool downs and change out of our wet clothes and all that stuff in a warm, dry, controlled environment. But, you know, part of the reason that we do that is so that we can do all of our cool down exercises and all that kind of stuff too.
And
that does
the access to the bikes and stuff, that
Yep.
extra 15 minutes, that extra 20 minutes on the bike.
Yep.
That doesn't really happen in the fall usually because by the time we drive back and different things like that.
Yep.
That unless somebody brings a bike out to like hop on themselves, it's usually the way we kind of add a little bit more on in the spring.
Yep.
The metro parks is a great point. Those are so beautiful that we have a chance to like run, that they're like 15 minutes away. So as a team, we meet and carpool out. We meet at the rack at like 7:15 and we load everybody up in the cars, upperclassmen drive, and we drive everybody out to where we're going for cross country. It is nice to get to sleep in just a little bit more in the winter to get to just go to the rack, but it is nice to get to do warm ups and stuff inside.
Yeah.
In the snow, we do a lot of neighborhoods just because it gets so snowy. It wasn't super terrible this year, but there's been some pretty rough years.
Yeah.
But we're chasing the snowplow around.
Yeah.
That's just part of living in the Northeast Ohio. It's worth it. The metro parks pay off. The fall is so pretty.
During cross, we'll hit up the towpath a couple of times, which is also very, very nice to have access to a national park. And you know, we have one of the best metro parks in the entire country, and then a national park that's free right in our backyard. So we're pretty fortunate that we have all sorts of different. You know, we can run on hilly stuff, we can run on flat stuff, we can run on bridle paths, we can run on bike paths, we can run on the towpath. We've got all sorts of different options to do.
I'm not going to make you do 5 for 5, but I was going to ask you what's your best long run you can think of?
I had some pretty good ones, and when I was out at Allegheny, Kevin Poole and I would get rolling pretty good. There was a couple like 15, 16, 17 mile long runs where we were sub 6 for the majority of the run, cutting down to like the 5:20s at the end. I had a handful that I did solo out around one of the lakes where I got rolling pretty good out there. Just had headphones in and just cranking along. So those are some of the ones that I always think about. those are probably my best ones, honestly, because that was just when I was my fittest. At DePaul, we had some really good ones too. We would run the roads for the first 4 or 5 miles, and they were chip and seal or gravel roads, and had some pretty good roll to them. And then we would come into the nature park and finish in the nature park, and we got some, 2-hour long runs out there too. In college, I had a loop called the All-American Loop that I did a lot, and then we had another one that was called Used Car Lot that I did a lot, and had some pretty good ones out there as well. One of my most memorable ones was my first ever carriage loop. We'd start at Fisher's and run out to the carriage loop and come back, and that was a 14-miler, and that was a huge deal the first time that I did that and completed that. I think I slept the rest of the day when I got home. I was so tired, but it was a 14-mile loop. What about you?
My favorite long run story is the Hastings one, but my best long run there was one back in like February last year. It was an on your own, and I ran it like 5-6 o'clock in the evening. I only went 12, but I think I averaged 6:40. Like, I think I only had one that wasn't sub 7, and everything else was essentially sub 6:50. And I just rolled and cut down to like 6:24. I remember getting on, we were still using the log as a team. I remember getting on and like looking at all the guys. Like, I ran faster than all of them today. I was pretty proud of it. I ran that one alone. I ran a pretty dirty one on Easter last year. It was like 14 miles, is the longest I've ever gone, and it was pretty fast. Once I'm alone, and if I dip under, then I feel like I have to like hold it. So it becomes a game, and that's I feel like the only way I can sustain the quality is if I turn it into a game. That one was at like 8 o'clock at night, because I think I did text you, guess what I did, and you were like, it's 10 o'clock. Awesome, but it's 10 o'clock at night. Why are you texting me this? I'm excited, but I don't know. Other than that, I think my camp one last year, the 13-mile one, was pretty, we got moving pretty good on that. We've had some fun ones where we've cut down, but that one was, I think, the whole time pretty fast.
Yeah.
I remember maybe a mile and a half out, some of the girls looking at me like, what are you doing? We're gonna see how this goes.
I ran over the summer.
Oh, did I?
Oh, that's right, you didn't.
I think I was in trouble because I think I had fallen off my mileage a little bit. So
Oh, that's
I
right.
had to suck it up and I had run a half marathon like 2 weeks before. That was like mid. But
Yeah, that's right.
I think I was in trouble.
Giving you too much credit.
I think it was, I had to suffer and pray for the fitness. Suffer through it, make it uncomfy, and hope it paid off 3 weeks from there. And it did.
It did.
But sometimes when you're not perfect at stuff, you gotta kind of accept the hurt on the back half.
Yeah.
I'm not encouraging that path, but that's the only way out of that. Is if you're the middle distance kid that struggles in the summers, then you better be ready to really hurt in August to get where you need to be in September. But
Yeah, I think long runs are also kind of a cheat code a little bit. I think it's just such an easy way, especially if you have a bunch of miles under your belt and you are a little bit stronger. You just got to rip the Band-Aid off and just get a couple of long runs in. I do really think it is kind of a cheat code, and at least getting that long run in every week is one way to just gain a ton of fitness really, really quick. Because the body remembers, and you can kind of revamp all of your cardiovascular system and get it back up and going pretty quick.
I mean, even this past year, I didn't run cross, and I couldn't run this past summer. But like you said, just that, like, the strength part of that, of I could hop in at camp and run 12 miles
Yep.
with you guys, that I had no business running 12 miles as fast as you guys were going, but there's just some level of...
Yeah. Well, I usually don't either.
Exactly. Yeah.
But obviously I'm older and have a lot more miles under my belt at this point. But that is my cheat code, is long runs and then sprinting back and forth across the field at meets.
What he runs the Guardian off of. My last question I was going to throw out there, I meant to ask earlier. Somebody starting to try to do long runs, what's the ballpark of like where to start? Like, I know we've talked about where you would put somebody in, but like high school are trying to work it in. I know that's usually a ballpark percentage we use.
Yeah, it's 20 to 25% of your weekly mileage. And then just slowly adding, whatever that number ends up being or whatever that amount of time ends up being, every couple of weeks, try to add 5 minutes to it. Once you feel like you've adapted and it is somewhat comfortable, see if you can add 5 minutes until you build up to, what the rest of the crew is able to do and kind of hold and manage. I think the quicker you can get to an hour, probably the better off you're going to be. If you're just a little baby freshman high school kid starting off, I think an hour run can do tremendous benefit from the cardiovascular side and from the mental, just sustaining that type of effort for a longer time.
Focus for sure. This has been a cool episode to film. We actually just ran Coach and I our last long run together.
Yeah.
Last Sunday. We'll run a little long run this Sunday, but it was our last really full long run effort as coach and athlete.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool to see it grow and go full circle. There's no little fun fact I was going to throw in there. I forgot it already. But I like having Goose here. It's been nice. He is actually the long run buddy, huh? Yeah. Okay. But yeah. The other thing I was going to say is kind of where the podcast idea originally started was I love the social piece of it, that even though I don't like running far, and running far alone especially, it's a fun hour and a half. You get to just kind of talk, and it's a little bit slow enough pace. You get to really talk and catch up about the weekend, about things maybe you want to talk through